And then, Madison Square Garden came around. It was one of the great nights of my life. Like really, really just truly incredible atmosphere.
Arthur Baker presents Looking for the Perfect Beat podcast.
And our guest this week is Kieran Hebden, Four Tet, formerly of Fridge, an old friend, and welcome to the podcast, Kieran.
Hi, Arthur.
How'd that sound? That was pretty cool, right?
Yeah, great.
Well, okay, the first question I like to ask my guests on the show are, can you describe your perfect beat? Because I've been looking, searching, seeking, finding for years, and I don't know if I've found mine, but I was wondering if you had found yours.
I mean, there's so many perfect beats. My absolute favorite that kind of gets me is the laid-back kind of dynamic beat. So like James Gadsden playing with Bill Withers, that type of feel where he's just barely moving, but it's just like the funkiest, like most incredible groove. And then the dynamics are there for it to just sort of like pop off any moment, like I hear that like Elvin Jones, that type of stuff where you feel like the kit can just sort of explode any moment. I love that sort of feel.
Yeah, those are definitely two good ones. Even like an Al Jackson thing, who you could sort of compare to James Gadsden. Al Jackson, totally. Who played for Al Green, and those kind of things. You have such a wide palette of music that you sort of delve into. What were you listening to when you were a kid? What were the first few records that really turned you on when you were a kid?
Like my parents had a lot of music in the house, my dad particularly, and it was classic like soul, like Motown, classic jazz and things. Like they would have parties a lot, and there was this record Needle in the Haystack by the Velvets that was like the kind of the anthem of our house. Like like they would jive in the kitchen to that record after dinner and stuff, like they were really good dancers. And yeah, that sort of classic Motown type of sound. And then, my mum loved Joni Mitchell. I would just hear that on the weekends. I remember her always listening to Joni Mitchell and being on the sort of like Joni Mitchell the more like 80s albums were coming out, like Wild Things Run Fast and stuff.
Well, those were very jazz influenced.
Exactly. So I was hearing those sort of things, and then my dad would be playing Coltrane and things. And then I got taken to, there was this jazz festival every year called the Bracknell Jazz Festival, where I'd see people like Carla Bley and Don Cherry and things, as a kid, like really sort of mind expanding avant-garde.
And your dad was into that music.
Yeah, totally. And so there was so much around me. And then I start developing my own taste first with the very first record I bought with my own money was Tears for Fears Shout. The
wow.
like 7-inch of that, and I think the second one was probably Falco Rock Me Amadeus.
Those are pretty cool tracks.
Pretty
cool,
I remember my dad coming home with the Blue Monday 12-inch,
Wow.
And it being like a mind-blowing moment for us as like, that was sort of like hearing electronic music for the first time, and hearing sort of like records made with drum machines, and I remember that sounding very sort of futuristic to me.
Well,
but then from there,
it sort of was.
It was, yeah.
But totally. You mentioned Shout. I actually turned down doing the remix for that. That's one of my faux pas of not doing that remix. Not, it was so slow, and at that point you couldn't really speed things up. But
yeah, totally.
I have the cassette. I still have that cassette that they sent me, and I turned it down.
And I was buying like 7-inches. I wasn't even aware of like dance music or anything at all. Like it was all just 7-inch singles of like hit songs, was what was kind of exciting. But then that sort of led me, then I sort of moved away from that as I got a little older because I started playing guitar. And once I started playing guitar, I got interested in, Hendrix and Zeppelin and, Guns N' Roses were out and everything. And that was, I think I was interested in learning to play guitar, but the music, I was kind of into the music, but wasn't connecting with me in the same way as what happened next, which was when grunge happened and like Nirvana appeared. And I was just like,
that was it.
Like, this is me, like everything I need. Them, like Mudhoney, and then Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that appeared.
And then is that when you decided to put a band together at that point?
Well, so
how old were you then when all those records were coming out?
Like 13, 14, those sort of ages. And when I'm 14, I'm like playing enough guitar that I can form bands. And you start forming bands at high school, and the concept is always let's just find everybody who can actually play instruments, and put them together and play covers,
Right.
And that's what I was doing. But then Fridge is the first band that I formed where it was like, never mind whether anybody can play their instruments or not. Like, what's the music, everybody? Let's form the band based on
Around
people
what you
having
like.
similar tastes. And that's a turning point in my life, working that out. That like the ideas were more important than the technical ability. And I was sort of learning that from the sort of punk lo-fi sort of movement that was happening. Was like everything was telling me like, yeah, don't worry whether you can play it or not. Like, just have the idea and go for it.
But you could actually play guitar.
I could, but like Sam, the drummer in Fridge,
I remember Sam.
Yeah, he was just starting out. Like at the point we met you, we'd only been going a couple of years, and we were really working it out as we were going along.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I remember the day I met you was my first ever time in a recording studio. I had never ever even seen a recording studio or been in one until we walked in that day and met you at Rack Studios.
Yeah, no, that was a good first studio to be in. Of course,
I realize that now very much.
The history of Rack and the records that were made there were amazing.
And I met Mickey Most while we were there that day.
Yeah, randomly walking down the hallway. I'm sure.
So crazy. Yeah. Like I think back to that now, me just like not even knowing what was going on, and him talking to me about recording, I don't know, Donovan records and things that I knew and liked.
I'm looking at a Donovan record right now in my
my
garage. It's weird you mentioned, but here's the thing. So how did I reach out to you? Because the thing was, I'm sure I first heard you on XFM. That you have been, I think you had played on John Kennedy's show or something, and then I would guess I found out that Trevor had you assigned to Trevor. I guess,
yeah,
but. Did I call you, or how did
you heard it on the radio?
Yeah,
and then you found that Trevor had released it, and I don't know whether you knew him or not, but you contacted Trevor, and then Trevor called me, and he was like, Arthur Baker, this record producer, is in London at the moment, and he's working on this album, and he's heard you on the radio, and he wants to have some new musicians come into the sessions and like see if they've got ideas for it, and has invited you to come down. And that was it. I think we were there like a couple of days later or something, I think.
Yeah, it was. Well, the album was the beginning of the Twisted Tenderness sessions with Johnny Marr and Bernard Sumner from New Order and Johnny Marr from the Smiths. And we went in there, and I thought it would be really cool to bring in young musicians and with new ideas and sort of try to stir up stuff with Johnny and Bernard. I'm not saying they were set in their ways. Their ways were pretty damn good, but I thought it might be cool to have other influences. And I called you, and I think Stuart Braithwaite from Mogwai, I think I had him in there also. What do you remember? I mean, no music exists from that unless you have a cassette somewhere.
I've got a CDR of one of the mixes I did on the day. And then on the album, on one of the tracks, there's like some of the sounds and things we made.
Right.
And basically what I remember is... Sorry.
No, I would love to hear that because I have nothing,
What I remember is that you basically were just pulling up sort of songs that you were working on and just sort of saying to us, like, just overdub any ideas you've got, on everything. So we were just pulling up tracks that were going, and we were adding synths and guitars and drums and just all sorts of things. And we just did that for a few days and then left. And then you just had bits of multi-track ideas that existed to do as you guys wanted later on,
Right. Well, yeah, it could have worked. Maybe it did work. I don't know. Because I don't remember. I don't remember I remember the process, but that's why I'd love to hear some of the stuff. Because I was also scratching and using samples and doing stuff on top of it too. And then we ended up at Real World, and then we got a little more conservative, as the record company gets involved.
I mean, I remember just thinking it was wild. It's like the whole studio's booked out, and it seems to be just absolute freedom for anybody to take their time doing whatever idea they wanted. It felt very low pressure and very experimental.
Well, we were trying to, that's what we were going for.
And, me having never been in a studio or never experienced a session before or anything.
Well, that wasn't a typical session, but
I realize that now.
But I guess it could be a typical session when you have the money and the time to do it. I mean, as someone making records in your own studio, you have pretty much that every day if you want it, right?
Yeah. I think the thing that I look back at now and find astounding is that I turned up to that completely relaxed. I don't remember being at all fazed by hanging out with any of the other musicians at all or being part of it. It felt like I didn't feel like, oh my God, this is a huge opportunity. I should be taking this incredibly seriously or anything. I just remember being quite relaxed and just enjoying it. And I remember like Johnny Marr made us feel very, very comfortable very quickly. You know, he was so good at just being like, oh yeah, this is fun. Let's just play guitars and hang out.
Yeah.
And it was just very relaxed. And I just didn't have a worry in the world. I just enjoyed it for a few days.
The beginning of a project can always be either that way or stressful, but usually I think in the beginning you're just getting to know people, and with you, you know, it was more like come on and have some fun, really. I mean, there was no pressure on, I didn't feel there was pressure on you. There could have been if you were like nervous and didn't, you know, like, what am I going to play? Is anyone going to judge me or whatever? I mean, obviously we were looking for new ideas, and we were looking for magic, right? Some magic to happen. That's what
one of the things I realize now, and I think back to that time, and I think that like one of the things that was my sort of like almost superpower around that time is that I had no interest in career or commercial success at all. Like I didn't make one record with any thought about whether it was going to sell. I didn't think about anything being like, oh, this is an important achievement. Hopefully I can sign this deal. Hopefully I can get this label interested. I absolutely didn't care about anything other than kind of like what was going on at the rough trade shop, and but, sort of what was going on XFM or whatever. That was about the limit of my goals,
It's getting your record on XFM.
Yeah, it was, and nothing else bothered me. I knew Trevor, I knew a couple of people, and I was like, just for even any of my music to even exist on vinyl was enough. Like, I never even asked anyone what the records were selling or anything. I didn't care at all.
It's crazy. People don't believe that, but I believe it because I was the same way. When I moved to New York and started making like Planet Rock, we didn't care. We weren't thinking about sales. I mean, the guys wanted to have a record that they could play for their friends and that they could dance to. And if it got on the radio, that would be great. And that's exactly how we felt. No thoughts about the money or anything. I mean, obviously, you have a few big hits, and then you definitely want to cash a check. But in the motivation for making music for me in the beginning was purely, can I make a record that people are going to dance to in a club?
Totally. And it would have been really uncool to if I'd been in that session for the electronic record and there'd been anybody talking about like, oh, maybe we can have a hit record. At that time, it would have been considered so uncool to be like that, like that would have been like, oh, what are you doing? Like, why are you even here sort of thing, like.
I mean, New Order, in my work with New Order, nothing like that was ever discussed, even singles, you make a record and then,
And I think people can't quite imagine that now. I don't feel that's for young people and stuff making music now.
I try to get that point across to my daughter because she's very into music and dancing and stuff. And I'm like, when I started, it was nothing about the money. It was all about getting your creativity out there. I think people want to be. I mean, the idea of wanting to be famous. I mean, no one wanted to be famous. They just wanted.
You want respect from your peers. You want to be part of your scene. You want to respect from your peers.
Well, that leads into a question that I had. The whole community. If you could think back and describe that community, because there was sort of a community growing with through Trevor, who Trevor doesn't get enough credit in the overall bit of the music scene in London at that time because he signed you and LCD, and he was really pretty open, and a lot of the music I discovered was through Output, through his label. So can you describe what was going on, how you met Trevor and that whole scene of like-minded people?
Well, I met Trevor through a guy called Luke, who was the bass player in a band called Emperor's New Clothes. And I'd met him just by chance in a record shop. Like, we just got talking, and he was like, oh, are you in a band? And I was like, yeah. And I sent him a cassette tape of stuff we were doing.
Hold on one second. Pause for a second. Hello.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, these people, they're all friends of ours and stuff, so it's, yeah, totally. Yeah, no problem at all. Where does this podcast go out? Okay. Oh, brilliant. Oh, amazing. Okay, fantastic. Oh, this is a great project. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I'm very happy to be included. Yeah, I know. Like, have you worked with Dan Paps over at Faber? Has he been there? Yeah, so I know him quite well. When there's a book coming out that he knows I'm interested in, he often sends it over.
Sorry,
Oh, okay,
they were doing. Sorry, man. They were doing
it's
the
okay.
yard. They were doing the yard, and all the you could hear. I mean, they're right next to the window with the blower. Okay, I know where we were. Go ahead. What? I did mention it, but okay, okay. All right, right. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so we were talking about describing the community in London, the music community, and I asked you about like how you met Trevor. Yeah, Trevor
Yeah.
Jackson. Yeah, how did you meet Trevor Jackson from Output?
I met Trevor Jackson through a guy called Luke, who was the bass player in a band called Emperor's New Clothes. And I just met him in a record shop and we got chatting and he was like, "Oh, are you in a band?" And I sent him a cassette tape of Fridge, the stuff we were making. And he passed that on to Trevor. And then Trevor approached us about how he was starting Output Records and wanted to put the music out. And from then onwards, I became close to Trevor, and he was kind of like quite a sort of mentor to me at the time. Like, he taught me so much about music and showed me so many things. And everybody was sort of, it was like Mowax Records and Metalheads and all these sorts of things that had a massive sort of impact on London. And Trevor was somebody who has sort of understood a lot of the influences and things that had gone into all that music, especially in relation to sampling and things like that, and like how people involved in hip hop, especially, I felt, had actually very wide ranging musical tastes because they were listening to so much music looking for samples and stuff all the time. And
Right.
Trevor was the person that seemed to understand that. Like, he knew great jazz records and funk records, and then he started showing me like post-punk records and all these things I didn't know, and he just knew so much music. And the two of us together were really excited by new music that was going on as well, like bands like Tortoise from Chicago, or things going on, and we were just excited about new electronic records, all sorts of things going on. And I think that was the scene. When you say there was a sort of scene, it was this combination of sort of rough trade clubs like the Blue Note, the End, this mixture of sort of non-dance music in some ways getting played in clubs, and there's a night that me and Trevor go out together in London that I always see as this unbelievable sort of formative night where we go out and it's the Warp anniversary and we go and see Boards of Canada and Orteca, I think, play at the Truman Brewery. And then we leave the Truman Brewery and we go to the opening of Fabric that's open that week, and Daft Punk are DJing. So we see Boards of Canada, Orteca, and then Daft Punk at Fabric.
On the same night.
In the same night. And then we leave Fabric and we go to the End and we watch Ronnie Size absolutely destroy the End. And all of that in one night in London.
That was obviously the heyday of everything. Was those years were so exciting. People, we'll talk about Britpop, but this was post Britpop, really. It was like
it was, and it
real.
was, yeah, it was really exciting. It was like me and Trevor there together, just sort of like sucking it all in, him introducing me to tons of new things I hadn't heard at the same time. And I was just sort of exploding at that moment. I just got access to computers and things. I was able to sample and make the music I wanted. The music I'd sort of imagined in my head for years and years and years, but the technology didn't exist yet for me to make it. Like, I couldn't afford samplers. I couldn't afford the equipment I needed. And then it was all suddenly available on computers.
But was that when you went from being in the band and then going to the Four Tet?
Yeah, because I feel,
that time?
yeah, because what happened with the band was like, playing guitar in a band and everything was fantastic. I was into it, but I felt like I was so into like electronic music and sampling and things. And I felt like I'd hold a guitar and it's like, oh, what can I do that hasn't really been done? But then when I got on the computer and I started being able to make loops of things and program drums and all that sort of stuff, I felt like, all right, I've got something futuristic to offer here, something that's like gonna switch things up in a way people haven't imagined yet, and that was a big deal for me, and that's exactly what's happening at that same moment.
But I mean, so how many records did you put out as Fridge, as the band? Like,
and we just put out, and one of the great things that another great thing that Trevor Jackson did when I look back now is he really documented the early years of my music in a really great way, and the early years of what the band, of what Fridge did, because he chose songs that we never would realize were our best things and made them the sort of focus. And we were too naive to understand. But I realize now you have this sort of naivety when you start out that you never ever get back again. And having him curate what we were doing those naive years was a real gift, like
that was a gift, because he is Trevor is such a lover of music, and he's so forward thinking.
And he presented it with incredible artwork, and he introduced me to Jason Evans, the photographer, who's ended up doing all my sleeves in my whole career ever since that moment.
Wow. That is, it's Peter Saville in a way, really, like how New Order worked with Peter their entire career.
Totally, like set the scene of everything, and it was an exciting, fun time, and it was really experimental. It felt like there were no rules at all. Like I saw Trevor play in nightclubs playing Herbie Hancock Sextant, and 23 Skidoo and records like this at sort of peak time. And we just thought it was the greatest, most fun thing ever. Like people were coming out to have their minds blown by something that they couldn't really conceive of, rather than going out to be like, oh, I just want to hear like a classic I've heard a million times before.
But, that's interesting, because when I first made it over to London, which was 87 and 88, and going to the WAG Club, it had that feeling even then, but then it sort of lost that feeling for a while. And then I think at the end of the 90s, it sort of came back. Because the WAG Club, Tim Simonon, you'd go, the first night I was in London, I went to the WAG, one of the first nights, and he was playing records, and he just, blew my mind. And then he did Bomb the Bass, and then, of course, Neneh with Buffalo Stance and all that.
Yeah.
So there were moments in London that I, was lucky enough to be around for. And there weren't just one. That East period was pretty crazy, too. But, I was going to ask you about Dialogue, right? That was your first Four Tet record?
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that you called it Dialogue, because you actually were having a dialogue with yourself, really? Because, well, to me, because there's no other musicians other than the flautist, right? I mean, you played everything.
Totally. Yeah, completely. Like it was, well, I mean, it's all made from samples. Like, like DJ Shadow's come out at that point, and like I was so, I was just when like Cypress Hill Black Sunday came out and like Illmatic came out and all these things, like I was so focused on the music in those records, like DJ Premier and people like that was sort of like taking like a loop and a drum break and just finding the greatest bit of a record and just turning it into this sort of minimalist masterpiece was something I was so into. And then DJ Shadow came out and like made collages of like 30 records, into a whole new song. And that was the sort of blueprint for me, and I sort of saw that and I was like, all right, well, what if we stop sampling like funk records and things? What if I start sampling anything and everything, all these crazy records from my dad's collection, country records, like music concrete, anything, and like Trevor was sort of into that as well. And so that's what I was kind of doing with Dialogue. And I was so into jazz, I discovered kind of like impulse and spiritual jazz. And
when did you first hear Pharaoh Sanders? When was it?
It will have been on, so soul jazz, Sounds of the Universe. The sort of beacons of music for me were Rough Trade and Sounds of the Universe.
And Stuart Baker, it sounded.
Exactly, yeah. And they put out this compilation called United Sounds of America or something, I think it's called, which had... it's got like somebody on the moon, on the cover. And it's got, Pharaoh Sanders Astral Traveling. It's the first place I heard Steve Reed, who I went on to work with. It had Sun Ra Orchestra on there, had stuff like Tribe Records. And that was I got that. And then I got Alice Coltrane Journey to Satchidananda, and I got Bitches Brew. Yeah. And I think the jazz that I knew beforehand was like, I knew the like more sort of straight ahead like bop and things like that, kind of blue records like that. And then I also knew very avant-garde stuff from going to those festivals when I was a kid, like Evan Parker, Carla Bley. So my sense of jazz was that it was either completely avant-garde, abstract, or it was very sort of straight.
Right.
But when I discovered those records that were like Bitches Brew with like, heavy drum parts, and different sort of grooves and like repetitive ideas and things. It was like a music I dreamt existed, and I suddenly discovered, oh, it does exist, and it is the greatest sound I've ever heard. I love this, like. And so off the back of that, I was like, I want to make a sort of version of that sound just using samples and computers. I want to make music the way Boards of Canada or Aphex Twin or any of these people do, but I want to make jazz.
Right.
That was my motivation for the first album.
I just listened to it today, and it really stands up, man. It's a really
thanks.
beautiful album, and I guess that's sort of when I brought you into the Pharaoh Sanders stuff, I guess, because I found like 3 or 4 tracks that we sort of collaborated on, that I'd given you samples from Thailand, I think. I mean, there's some weird shit with the Thai boxing music, which I always thought was like the most incredible music. And then, because I went in with Pharaoh really like in 98, and I don't know, I just sort of sat with the stuff. And then I think you would have went in around 99. And but see, you were still doing things obviously with Fridge, because the whole band came in.
All that was going on at the same time. I mean, this is what I'm saying about it being such an amazingly open time. Like, we'd come and hang out with you at the pool bar. Is that what it was called?
Well, I was going to ask you about that set, because you played a live set that's pretty crazy, a really cool set. But someone was singing with you, and is that
Dempsey?
Jeffrey?
That guy who had the record out, Dempsey, Jeff.
Yeah, I think I have a name, not Jeff McIntyre, Jeff McIntyre.
But the record was called Dempsey.
Dempsey,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all these years, I've seen this singer, and I'm like, who is the singer with Fridge? And then we just did some research, and
I mean, that's the only performance. That was just a one-off thing that was like, that we did just to try it out, I think, at that thing. But it would have been one of those days where something like that
was 2000. That was in 2000, because the bar didn't open till beginning of 2000.
Okay, and I remember hanging out there. I remember seeing Peaches there, maybe do something
that was
wild.
That was her first London gig, and she brought her drum machine. See, it's funny, because a lot of people I've been talking to, I invited them to these things. I don't remember who the fuck I invited,
Yeah.
But then, like I was talking to Peter Hook, and he said, "Oh yeah, we went at the gig at Bonds and with Soul Sonic Force." I go, "You were there?" He goes, "Yeah, it was the Blizzard. You invited us." I don't remember, the guest list. You don't remember.
But it would totally, we'd be at a night like that, the band would play, and then you would say to me like, "Oh, I've just been on this trip to Thailand, and I've got these amazing recordings, and I'm thinking of doing something with Pharaoh Sanders," and none of us would have thought any of that was crazy. It was all like, yeah, like anything different, it's exciting,
Yeah, no, I mean, being in the studio with Pharaoh when I recorded the songs, and there were songs that I had written, so it was sort of such a special, thing, one of the most special sessions ever, but for me. But then it was sort of, what do you do with it, And then I brought you in on spirituality, and you guys you cut like a great dirgy, I wouldn't call it rock track, but just sort of a thing with great beats. And yeah, I mean, do you remember getting your hands on the performances and how you went about doing it? Or
yeah, I remember doing 1 or 2 days with you in a studio. Maybe it was like Edwin Collins' studio or something.
Could be. Yeah, you know what? That sounds. I got to find the name of that studio, but I think it was. Yeah,
in like North London, we did a couple of days where it was like the electronic thing again, where it was like you had multi-tracks of stuff you were working on with Pharaoh Sanders, the things that you were doing, and you were just like got Fridge to come in and just be like, do your thing over these multi-tracks and let's see what we get. We would just do passes of us playing guitar and like drums. We would do this thing where Fridge had this trick that we did on a lot of the records where we would record the whole track and then we would actually mute all the channels and we would just record tracks of percussion over the top of everything.
Yeah, no, I'll never forget it because I have a film of it.
Okay, and then we would go back afterwards and see what sort of happy mistakes happened by performing percussion without listening to the track.
Yeah, because I remember it's in the video.
Okay.
This is obviously true. I have it on video. I'm going to the engineer. Are they hearing anything? No, they're not hearing anything. How is that possible? But it when you listen to the track now, it really sort of it worked. There were a lot of happy accidents there.
But then there's also some music from around that time that I did with you where you just came to my apartment and we would just listen to things that you were working on and then you would give me samples and files of stuff.
Yeah.
So there were things that I made for you, something with a harp player, I think, where...
Yeah, well, we had done harp on the Pharaoh Sanders track. So I don't know if I've given you the samples or if you
Yeah.
came into the studio when I was doing that. You might have been there.
I should have a look
And
for
I
that as
had a
well. Like
tabla
this.
player. I had a tabla player. And
Yeah. Yeah, because we'd also hung out and just listened to records quite a bit, and you had this concept of like taking pieces of spiritual music and doing these new sort of arrangements them from all different religions and things.
Right.
And you'd explain to me how you'd come to Mogwai with My Father, My King,
Yeah.
and you had an idea for trying to do an arrangement of Taito.
Wichitaito.
Yeah, you were
Pepper.
working on
Yeah,
Jim
yeah.
Pepper,
Yeah.
on Embryo, and we listened to that together.
Yeah.
And it was a bunch of things like that you were looking at. Yeah,
It was somewhat ahead of its time, I think.
yeah. I mean, it was a hugely ambitious project that you were in the middle of, and
which I never completed.
yeah, yes.
I'm going to be putting out in October the remnants of all that stuff and just master it and put it out. But there are a few tracks that we did, the sampling ones that I found, and they're really good.
Oh, cool.
They are of the time, you know. It's
Yeah.
sort of, but they sound fresh now. They obviously sound fresh now. I don't know. I mean,
I know
we
it's
didn't-
sort of. I just remember it being a time where there was a lot going on, and like we were saying earlier, we weren't hugely precious. Like it was like, let's go into the studio and see what happens. Was quite a normal sort of concept for me.
Right. And the thing is, this was all this was in the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s, because I know that I went, the Thai stuff was from 99. So, you know, I mean, so we were working on that. And then Trevor Jackson output, he started signing other bands who became sort of, I'm not saying commercially, but who sort of blew things up, being like LCD and The Rapture.
Yeah, he suddenly. It was like everything suddenly got more attention in a strange way, which was kind of exciting. But also, when that happens, it's sort of the beginning of the end of things as well. Maybe
Well, it actually was.
It was.
Success can kill your record label.
Yeah.
What happened with me was Streetwise. We were so successful, we lost control, and we ended up going bust. So I think Trevor had a similar thing, and he lost some of the groups. But
he was also. I remember him being quite focused on his own. It made him also be like, I need to slow down with all this and do my own music. You know.
Well,
so,
he did Playgroup.
Playgroup,
the infamous Playgroup album. You know.
Yeah. So he was really busy with that for a while, and like I remember. And he was working with a lot of people. I remember him working with Spike Stent and things, and going down to that studio in Olympic or something.
Olympic Studio, which
when he was working on that. But by that time, you know, that's a little bit further on, and at that point, I'm more grown up, and I've sort of found my own feet, and I'm doing my own thing.
But I have a great picture of you and James at the Elbow Room in Shoreditch.
Okay.
When we did that, I did a little party there, and The Rapture were DJing. I don't know if you remember this, but you're in deep conversation. I was wondering, what could you have been talking about?
Okay.
Any ideas? I doubt it. But,
I don't remember. I remember going to that because
was that the first time you would have met him though? Because he hadn't really come over here, and I brought him for the Return to New York party, which was in November 2002. It was his first gig. I don't know if you were at the gig or not, but we were doing the parties at the Great Eastern Hotel.
I don't know that I've ever. I thought I'd never even met James Murphy at all. But like maybe like in those early days.
Wait till now.
Till now, yeah. I don't remember. So maybe So there must be
the picture.
But it would make sense that I met him at one of those parties. I must have met him maybe through the Hot Chip guys at some point, you know, like when they were all working together.
Oh, this was definitely, we threw a party.
But maybe earlier than that, yeah.
This is Trevor was there, and James, and The Rapture, everyone for Errol, everyone was there. Like free food and drink, everyone was there.
It was probably like.
Well, it was me and Sean McCluskey started this party called Return to New York, and we did it at the Great Eastern.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And first gig, LCD, our first party had LCD as the guest band, and James had told me that he had played a bunch of gigs, and when he got there, he was like, "This is our first live gig ever," you know. So it was sort of, but yeah, okay. I was going to ask you. So where was? Okay, Pharaoh Sanders. So we did that, and then. Fast forward like 20 years or whatever, and then you're doing a Pharaoh Sanders project with Floating Point, yeah.
Well, so I wasn't involved in. Well, Sam Floating Points, he did the album with Pharaoh Sanders and the London Symphony Orchestra, and they, he'd written this big piece of music, and this collaboration had been set up, and it was quite a few years in the making. And when they'd finished the album, they did a playback of it at the studio that they recorded out in LA, and I went to the playback, and I met Pharaoh. I'd seen Pharaoh play a few times over the years, but I'd never met him. And I saw him that time. This is just before he passed away, and he was incredibly frail. You could tell that it was sort of coming towards the end, and they'd made this incredible album together. That was seemed very apparent, this was going to be his last sort of project and everything. And Sam Floating Points is a good friend of mine, so I was able to be there and hang out and everything. And then after he passed away, there was, I think there was the idea of doing a concert to perform the music. It had never happened, and it never happened during the time, and Pharaoh would have never been well enough to do it. So Sam agreed to do a show at the Hollywood Bowl, and Shabaka Hutchins said he would play the saxophone part and learn Pharaoh's part as a tribute. And Sam decided to, he played all the instruments on the record. He decided, multi-tracking everything. He decided to put this band together for this performance at the Hollywood Bowl, and I was one of the musicians.
Wow.
For that.
Well, that was a big project. How did that happen, financially? How were they able to do that? No, because it just seems like a crazy thing that would happen at the Hollywood Bowl. Was it on, what label was that out on?
On Lawaka Bop, which is the
So
label David Byrne's
yeah,
connected to. They'd released the record, and they'd it was Lawaka Bop were involved from the beginning of putting together the record and everything. I think it was just one of those things where I think everybody wanted the show to happen. I'm sure it lost money probably to put it on this sort of one-off event, but because it was with the LA Philharmonic, and it was me, it was Dan Snaith from Caribou on piano, Cara Liz Coverdale playing harpsichord. There was Celeste. There was
very ambitious, man.
Really, really, one of the most ambitious things I've ever been involved in, and it was just one piece of music that lasts kind of 50 minutes. And it was just one performance of that. But it was an incredible privilege to be part of. And the moment we were on stage, and there were in-ear monitors, and I took the in-ear monitors out because I only had to play for about sort of 15 minutes in this whole piece. And the bit on stage where I could hear all the live instruments around me, when the full string section came in, it was life-changing moment to just hear that for real.
Not in your headphones, yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. Pharaoh Sanders, not only a massive influence to me, but these strange little moments, where I was sort of one step away from him, and then I did get to meet him and shake his hand.
Yeah, that's great. When Sam started the project, did you mention that you had played on these tracks? It was something you forgot about.
No. I had a bunch of Pharaoh Sanders stories, of doing the thing with you, but never meeting him, but just being part of this thing that was going on. And then there's what you were talking about, scenes in London and stuff, and another sort of pivotal thing that happened to me sort of after Output and all those things was the scene around that club Plastic People that was in London.
Yeah.
Where that's where I got to know
Oxford. Where was it? Oxford Street, or
I think initially it opened there, but then it was in Shoreditch. It had this incredible this incredible cool sound system, and this guy Ade, who was running it, would have so many interesting things come in, and it was where I did my early shows. It was one of the first places I had a DJ residency, and I would go and see people like Theo Parrish there all the time, and very sort of inspiring. And Ade put on a festival, well, not a festival, a party for New Year's Eve one night. I think 2001 or 2002, he throws this New Year's party with the greatest lineup that's almost ever happened at an event I've been to. It's got Madlib, Questlove, Pharaoh Sanders, Giles Peterson, Basic Channel, just maybe ESG played or something, maybe just an obscene lineup where there's just all these crazy things, you can't believe it. And Pharaoh Sanders is given the midnight slot for and he's got a band of I think it's a band of UK musicians maybe playing with him and stuff. And he starts off and he's playing more sort of gentle and things, but then he starts playing a little more fierce, and the crowd's getting more amped up more and more, and this sort of feedback thing starts happening between him and the crowd, where you can sense the level of excitement in the room, and Pharaoh like picking up the energy more and more and more. And because it was New Year's, they had this projection of like a clock on a screen behind him to show when it was going to hit midnight. And just as it's getting to like midnight and the crowd starts going wilder and wilder, and Pharaoh just starts playing with like unbelievable passion, like not holding back in any way. And, sometimes he did that thing where he would like sing as well as playing.
He did that in the studio. He was singing.
Yeah, and he was singing. And I remember maybe like even like beating his chest while he was singing to get these sort of like vibrato effects and things. And the crowd was going wild, and it's midnight and Pharaoh's playing. And I was there. It's like me and Giles Peterson, Dan Snaith from Caribou. Like, I bet I wonder if Trevor was there. Like, I would expect he was. It was just like, there was like Madlib, like just an amazing crew of people all there. And we're all just having our minds blown, by Pharaoh Sanders and having this collective experience. And that was, people talk about that all the time from that circle of friends as a very important, pivotal moment, where, and then Pharaoh Sanders then played at All Tomorrow's Parties, which was a really important festival as well.
That's where I first saw Mogwai.
Okay. Yeah, and it was one of these All Tomorrow's Parties festivals where, you'd probably watched in that same day, you'd seen, like Suicide and Explosions in the Sky and Jizza or something, like a crazy mix of stuff.
No, they were great.
And like mid-afternoon, Pharaoh Sanders.
Flaming Lip Split. I mean, bands like that. Mercury Rev, I saw them there. I mean, it was sort of very random, amazing music. Yep.
And in the middle of all that was Pharaoh Sanders. And once again, like, because sometimes you would hear stories of him playing, Pizza Express or something, and it might be more sort of gentle, like, and sort of subdued.
What? I've never heard that one, no. Pizza Express, okay.
Well, no, because that was a big thing for jazz musicians. I know. Paid a lot by Pizza Express.
Yeah, for sure.
And Pharaoh Sanders, like, I think I was always nervous. Like, I was like, I'm going to see one of these great old jazz musicians, but they're going to be playing something more gentle. But he came to ATP and he absolutely tore it up. Like, people were like crying in the crowd. It was just sort of like really, like, he just brought like a level of sort of fire and sort of showed everybody like how it can be done. That was a powerful thing. So there are just these moments along the way where. And I saw him play in the park in New York, and they have the band shell in Prospect Park. And I saw him do a concert there, and it was like a free concert open to the public. And that was an important thing for me to see, to be in New York and just see just like regular people all come out and just be like, oh yeah, my dad was into Pharaoh Sanders or whatever. And I go to this free concert and him play for the sort of New York community as like an English guy growing up far away from. I try and describe this to people sometimes, that if you grew up in England, you might have, and you discover something like American jazz music through a compilation that Soul Jazz puts out. You have it on this sort of like pedestal as this sort of like cultural experience that feels very removed from what you're used to in England, And to be standing in Prospect Park with like, all the people from Brooklyn getting into Pharaoh Sanders was an important moment for me.
That sounds like a special moment for sure. So I wanted to know when you decided to be a DJ and how that whole progression went from making music and how did you decide to start DJing? When did you decide to start DJing? And that was a question I had. So
I come to DJing in kind of a strange way, because obviously, I'd been so involved in music and all that time that you're talking about in London in the early 2000s and everything. You would think it would be natural for me to be like, oh, why aren't I want to be a DJ playing in clubs and things. But I never really gravitated towards that because I was busy with the band and all those things. But then sort of around 2007, 2008, something like that, I get invited by Timo Maas to come and play at his residency in Ibiza.
That's not that. You know how random that sounds? Timo Maas in Ibiza. Now, how did he know? How do you guys know one another? And
I didn't know him at that point, and his booking agent David Levy was a big fan of mine, and I think he had suggested to Timo, like, oh, you should get Keiran like to come and do a set. Maybe that would be interesting. Like, he's never played in Ibiza before.
But what were you playing? You were playing then before that, or you were
No, I
DJing?
wasn't at all. I was like DJing here and there, like a little bit, but hardly at all, you know. So I just packed like a bag of records. You know, I'd play like friends' parties, little things, but it wasn't, I couldn't mix. I wasn't interested in serious DJing particularly at that point. I would play like the odds event, like a Ninja Tune party or something, but this was just, I'd never been asked to play at something like this, and I'd never been to Ibiza. So I was like, yeah, I want to go. Like, let's go see. And it was a DT10, and so I was like, all right, this is a legendary thing. Let's go check it out. And I went there, and the first thing that happened was I was taken to this like villa where Timo Maas was staying, where we had this enormous dinner, you know, with like 10 other DJs or whatever, and everybody's hanging out and socializing and stuff, and everybody's being really nice to me and things. And we do the party. I play completely inappropriate records. You know, I'm playing Aphex Twin and random Carl Craig tracks and like, I don't know, jazz records, anything I'm into. Early on in the evening, no one's getting that into it, but I'm kind of enjoying it. And then Timo Maas says to me, he's like, look, he was like, you should get into DJing. He was like, he was like, you're having great fun here. He was really nice. And he was like, you should totally be a DJ. You should get into it more. And he's like, I'm starting a residency in London at the end. And he was like, I'm going to play all night in room 1 every time I do the residency, which was bi-monthly, every 2 months. He was like, you should do room 2 and be the other resident DJ. And I was just like, okay, sounds great, you know. And I got a residency at the end. And the first time I did it, the first 2 or 3 times I did it, I was a disaster. Like, because the crowd was coming and they didn't know who I was. Like, it wasn't a crowd that cared who I was at all. It was much more European. It was people who wanted to dance. It was sort of, you know, I didn't quite have the right records. And I would be able to get the crowd dancing for a bit. And I'd play a couple of records. And then I'd always play something wrong and like lose the crowd completely.
Clear the floor.
I'd clear the floor multiple times every night. I was searching for records. I couldn't mix or anything. I was learning how to mix properly and stuff. Anyway, I did this residency for a year, and then James Holden got a residency at the end, and the promoter at the end teamed me up with him and said that would be a really good fit. And then I did the James Holden residency maybe for 6 months or a year. Anyway, at the beginning of doing the stuff with Timo Maas, I couldn't hold it down. But by the end of my time at the end, I headlined the main room, you know, and I was just like, I had it down and I knew what I was doing. And then I went and got my residency at Plastic People, which was much smaller. You know, it's like 250 people or something. I started playing there every month. And that from then on, I took DJing like really, really seriously. It started I wanted to make music to play in clubs. I wanted to be a great DJ. And the motivation at that point has continued right until now. I've got this drive to be a DJ inside me ever since then. I like the kind of like competitive sort of excitement of it. Like it feels like an area where there's always room for improvement. I feel like I'm learning all the time, getting better. Like that idea of clearing a floor, I want to be the person who never clears a floor, who like comes in and can turn it around and can look at a crowd and be like, I'm going to play the music like they've never even imagined before, and I'm going to get this absolutely popping off. Like the excitement of that really drives me still, you know?
The idea it was Timo Maas is really... No, I did a mix for him for Oakenfold's label, Perfecto, and I met him. He's a really nice guy. Just would never have been the person who I would have thought would have brought you to Ibiza. But David Levy definitely sounds more like it was that was his master plan to get you to be a
so
DJ.
good at connecting people and stuff. But it was Timo's positivity, and like he was so encouraging towards me. I see that as like a sort of pivotal moment of him just being like, you can do this.
He changed your career.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, Timo Maas changed your career. But you know, the thing is, when I've seen you DJ a few times, and the one time I saw you in Miami, it just blew my mind, because you literally can play anything. And the way I think your audience expects you now. You have your own audience, I think, and they expect you to just play anything. And you know, and they'll be very accepting. Of course, in the beginning, as you said, it wasn't like that at all. But I was really impressed when you were playing with Sam and in Florida. Very cool. And and the music you're making too. It just seems like such a career U-turn to have started where you did. I mean, to me, I'm sure to you, it probably doesn't.
No, I can see how it definitely is how it can be like it is quite a U-turn in some respects. But I think the great thing for me about it is it like by applying the sort of ideas of dance music and dance music culture, but then bringing in my ideas about melody and influence and all the sounds and everything I was interested in, but then putting it into that context
with the
gave my music a sort of new lease of life, to like,
well, for sure, yeah.
To be somebody who understands, I don't know, to be into like spiritual jazz or whatever. It's sort of by making dance music inspired by all those things, sort of gave me somewhere new to go, because I'd made a lot of music already before I sort of got into that area. And now I think dance music is such an incredible communicator. It's so, you can reach people in this different sort of way because it's so physical, like the records come on and people respond with their body and stuff first before they think about what's musically actually happening.
Well, they don't. I don't even think they think of what music's happening. They respond to the...
maybe not at all. Yeah. And I think working in a realm that has that going on allows me to do stuff that stays kind of very alive, like the people from all generations and all different parts of the world and stuff can sort of connect to, and I really like that aspect of it,
Well, the other thing is, interestingly enough, I was going to ask you about this, because most of your music that I know, and I don't know 1/10 of what you've done, probably 1/100th, is typically instrumental, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, am I wrong or right?
No, that's true. Yeah.
So basically, dance music is a perfect element for you to continue in because people now respond to the music and the beats and there's so few vocal dance records that are any good. I mean, there's obviously poppy dance records, but it's interesting because you and your music and very similar to Mogwai, because they've never done vocals either, and it seems like to me when I was speaking to Stuart doing a Q&A on the film, it's almost like people can write their own lyrics and their own stories to your music and his music because there's no lyrics that get in the way, right? When they hear your music, they're bringing their own story in their mind. I think that's sort of special and different because
I listen to a lot of instrumental music as well, and that's a quality of it that I like. That I like to put on a record and create a soundtrack to my life, like that's sort of just sets the mood for whatever's going on. So I listen to a lot of instrumental music for that. I'm less of a sort of lyrics guy and things. I hear the music way before I hear what's going on in the song.
Right. No, I mean considering that, that's what dance music really has turned into, that more of a physical thing where people are responding to the melody and the beats and not really the lyrics, because the lyrics are, can't be as international as the instrumentals can, because an instrumental has no country, it has no language. It's just the music.
Mm-hmm.
When so you were DJing on your own, and when did this whole thing with Fred again and Skrillex, were they friends, and then you just said, hey, it would be fun to go to Madison Square Garden and do a fucking gig?
Well, I've been friends with Skrillex for like 10 years or so now. The first time we played together was in London at the Camden Underworld.
Wow.
And we were like, let's just do something crazy, like that nobody would expect. And I was like, let's play like a punk venue. Like we did that 10 years ago, and we'd collaborated here and there. We were just in touch, like friends and things. Right. And then Fred appears, like, the young new producer, and was reaching out to me, being like maybe we could meet up sometime and like work on some music and things. So I got to know him a little bit, and then he knew Sonny, and it was just sort of in the air, like, we're all hanging out and like we're friends and things. And
Sonny, Skrillex.
Sonny Skrillex, yeah. And I was at a point as well a few years ago where I was like, I need to open myself up to like collaboration a bit more. I've made a lot of music on my own, and I've done a lot of production work. I've just done a couple of albums with like Neneh Cherry, working with people who did things very different to what I do. But I was like, I need to open myself up to working more with people who do things similar to what I do, so we can make like electronic music together and things like that. So I was looking for something new in some ways. Yeah, I was with Fred in, he did a show with him and Swedish House Mafia at this small club called Hollow in New York. And the level of excitement when I was with him, and when we walked into the room and everything, I could just, the buzz in the room about things going on, I could just feel, I was like, the energy is here right now. I was just like, I was like, whatever this group of friends does, it's like you were saying, that moment in London, where there's a real sort of scene. And it's like me, Fred, Sonny, like people who are all in our orbit. And me and Fred have the same booking agent, and he was there as well. And I was like, we should book. We were talking about doing a show together, and I was like, we should book Madison Square Garden, and we should try.
That was your idea.
That was my idea, and I was like, we should do that as soon as possible. I was like, I don't think anybody would see that coming. The conversation was initially was like, oh, maybe we could work towards this happening in a couple of years or something. And I was like, I actually think we should do it now. I think we should do it as soon as we possibly can. And we got the earliest date we could get was a few months away. 4 months away, and I remember going and doing this. We got to visit the venue and do a sort of like walk around to see it. And it was like a team of people from the venue all looking at me being like, all right, well, what's the idea? And I was like, well, we're just going to sit up on the floor over here. And I was like, yeah, and we'll just do like a party, and like everybody being like, what? Like, it's the craziest plan ever.
What is he talking about? Yeah.
And then we were like, let's do some small warm-up shows first to make sure that musically we've got everything kind of locked in, and so we were like, let's do 3 shows in London, just announced on the day, and we, doing smaller clubs. We did the Electric Ballroom in Camden, we did Electric Brixton, we did the Troxy, and just venues that I were like, oh, like, these are venues I've been going to since I was a kid or whatever. It's fun to do. Right. And then we came to New York and we did like LPR, places like that. And then, Madison Square Garden came around, and like the buzz, it sold out in like a minute or something. Like the excitement about the whole thing was just absolutely. And the meetings we had beforehand, months before, were like, would this be possible? Would anybody buy a ticket? Like, maybe if we only sold the floor, like maybe if. And by the time it came around, it sold out in a minute, and I was just like, okay,
that is insane. Right, you've created a monster,
And on the night, fortunately, like, it lived up to everything I hoped it would. It was one of the great nights of my life. Like, really, really, just truly incredible atmosphere. Everybody was into it. We were playing from the moment the doors opened, and like people came in, and it was just like a proper party. And we put the craziest amount of sound system that anybody has ever seen in Madison Square Gardens. We hung like 8 times the amount of the normal PA you'd put in for a show there, so that wherever you were in the room,
you could feel the music.
And you had a proper stereo image, because we were just like, people need to feel this. It can't be disappointing in any way at all. So we really like went for it in terms of sound, but we didn't have a big light show. We didn't have a video wall. We didn't have any of the things you normally have at a big show.
None of the typical things.
None of the typical things, because all the money went on the sound. But we had this idea, and me and my lighting guy I worked with, Ed, I was like, well, let's just have just the house lights on. I went to see, I saw Fugazi play when I was a teenager. My dad took me to see Fugazi at Brixton Academy. They would play. The shows would be £5 to get into, and they would just have the house lights on at the venue. No light show, nothing, and just like raw power. And the band was so powerful that you didn't care. Like, it was just the craziest atmosphere. It was wild. And I learned such a lesson that I was like, sometimes these things are just show business, and it's just not, you don't need all of that.
Well, think about the early raves and stuff or anything. Yeah, they were just in a field with no lights,
Yeah, totally. And just sometimes, you've got to remember, like, this isn't show business. This is about like connecting with people, So Madison Square Garden starts, we just have the house lights on, the work lights. It looks ugly as hell, like, and the concept is for the first 2 hours of the night, it's just going to be the work lights on, really bright in the room. And then we have it planned where we've got a song called Baby Again that we made together.
And you shut the lights all out, yeah.
Exactly. And on the drop of Baby Again, we're going to turn all the lights in the room off. And my lighting guy's there, and I've got to give him a cue. I've got to wave to him, and I've got to hold up 4 fingers, be like, you've got 4 beats to shut all the lights off. And the moments when we shut the lights off on the drop, again, absolutely one of the all-time greatest moments. Like, the level of excitement in the room, people didn't see it coming, they didn't understand what was going on, and it just elevated the event to this like level of like total excitement that just sustained for the rest of it. And then we do that, and then a few months later, because of doing that show, Frank Ocean pulls out of Coachella, and we get invited. We're like, we need a last minute headliner. We've just done MSG. And they're like 3 days before the show, we're suddenly just at Coachella and we headline Coachella. So that's it's a crazy story in my life as well.
No, that is a crazy story because wait, what do your family think about the changes in your career? I mean, I don't know if they're around. I don't know who's,
Yeah,
but
like my father's passed away. Like he died like 2018 or something.
oh,
All my family's just been really into it and really
right.
supportive of everything all the
If
way
anything you
along.
do,
Like
like you
of
change,
everything,
yeah,
and I think they've just loved it. They come to everything they can. My parents, especially, my sister's in the music industry as well, and she's in management, and she works with Shania Twain actually. So
right.
she's highly experienced, and
She must have thought that the Madison Square Garden thing was going to be a disaster. Did she, or
no, she
a
didn't think it
bit?
was
No.
the reason she didn't think it was going to be a disaster is because I got her to help.
Oh, okay.
And so,
Good. Keep it in the family for
yeah,
sure.
there's been a few moments where I got in over my head over the last few years, but my sister's been the person who's been able
Oh,
to
that's
come
great
in
to
and
have
be
that.
like,
That's
all
great to
right,
have
this
that.
is what you need to do, and this is how to like get this under control, and this is how you do an arena show.
Wow.
Like she knows how to do those things. So yeah, that's been so powerful. And then my daughter just turned 15, like I think for to be a little kid and like be like, oh, my dad's suddenly playing at Coachella. Like I think
I
when
know that must be.
I think it's pretty surreal for her, like, and I'm her like embarrassing dad.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. No, I
it's a weird,
totally feel that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a weird sort of thing. But yeah, generally, yeah, I think for my family, like I do shows, and especially when I play in London, and my like aunts and uncles and godparents and everybody comes out. Like it's like that's a nice thing, to see all my family there at these events enjoying it as well.
Well, yeah, it seems that your family helped and create your musical background anyway. I mean, the fact that your dad took you to those gigs and you had the music at home and everything.
Oh, completely. Like it's my music, like it's my life. Like everything that's happened to me from the moment I was kind of born really has ended up connecting me to music, and everything I've done. They're so intertwined, these things, like the choices that my family made and the way they've been around me my whole life has completely guided what's happened to me as a musician.
Right. And as a person, I assume too. Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
I was going to ask you, I mean, when you're planning your sets, and I'm sure you do plan them somewhat, where are you sourcing your music? Do you do it all on your own and just sort of look around for new music? Or are you just playing mostly your own stuff now and your friends' stuff?
I'm looking for music all the time. Like I'm still, if I hear something somewhere and I'm like, oh, that could totally work, in this different context. Nobody's playing that like
Right.
that. I'm looking for things. I'm looking for things that are just great tracks in themselves. I'm looking for things to sample. I'm in record shops all the time. I'm on Discogs all the time.
So you're still 100%,
I'm deep
probably
in it.
more.
Yeah, I'm deep in it, looking for things all the time.
So you're actually looking to, not to be cheesy, but you are looking for that perfect beat, right?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. And I'm also like, there are moments where I am playing a lot of my own music because there are things that I want to play where I can imagine it in my head, and it's almost it's efficient for me to make it. Be like, I need to
Right.
make this thing rather than try and find the record. So I do,
Yeah.
and that's a very good sort of inspiring thing to sort of keep me going. To have an idea, to be like, oh, like this festival's coming up, I need a club track that
That'll kill people. Yeah.
that's going to work at this event. And that's been a massive motivator for, if I have really big shows coming up, then I'll be like, I need something that's going to work in this certain way. And I've often, some of the best things I've made over the last few years have been driven by that.
Well, and your inspiration is coming from that now, pretty much 100% on making music.
Yeah, and I'm not really. I don't. I'm sort of out of the like album cycle and everything like that sort of world that when we talk about working on the electronic album and things and how things were in the '90s, where it's so like album focused. It's like, all right, you do an album, then you tour it, and you like. And I did all those things, and you do press, and it's this sort of cycle
Right.
that doesn't exist for me at all anymore. Like if I make albums, it's as and when I sort of get a body of work together that I feel there's something worth doing. But like, I don't care whether I make an album or not particularly anymore.
And Yeah, no, that makes sense, especially when you're DJing all, traveling and DJing and being able to test your music out, which is another thing. Back in the day when I started, I had Jelly Bean at the Funhouse would, if I brought a tape, he'd play it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You get to test your music. I mean, obviously your music is probably always works in progress when you're making music for DJ
Oh
gigs.
yeah, and I don't release anything that hasn't been like tried and tested
Yeah,
loads of times.
yeah,
Sometimes I'll have a track and it's like I start playing it and it's like over a year later that it gets released to the public, and
right.
I've been like working it the whole
Fine tuning it
time.
the
Yeah,
entire,
as
yeah.
I play it at like venue after venue.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Some guys don't do that. Some guys
Mm,
don't want to play it till it's done. I mean,
yeah.
how do you know it's done until you play it? You know?
I often don't
Yeah.
even understand the music. I feel like until I see it in front of a crowd. Like sometimes I make something and I don't even understand if it's any good or not. And then I play it to a crowd and I just suddenly see everybody around me connect. And
Right.
I'm like, oh my
Oh
God,
shit. Yeah, I've
actually
done
there's
it.
something here.
Okay, I had a question. You mentioned Neneh, and
Mhm.
Cameron McVeigh claims that I mentioned you to him, and that's how they found you to work with them.
I actually remember this. I
Okay,
actually remember
why,
this.
why don't you describe it? Because it's
So the
going to be better
situation
coming from
is Fridge does a show and like I don't know, early 2000s, so at this club called the 12 Bar on Denmark Street,
right. I
which is
know it.
like the smallest little folk club of all time. It holds like 20 people or something. And Fridge plays there. I can't even remember why we did it. And you brought Cameron McVeigh down to the show as a friend of yours to come and check it out. And you introduced us to him then. And I remember the two of you guys like being there at the show and everything. So you introduced me to him, and then way, way, way further down the
No, that's
line.
years away.
Yeah.
That's like 6 years or something.
Yeah, yeah. And then as years pass and I'm connected with Neneh. I'm trying to think who connected us. But anyway, when we're connected, Cameron is like, I met you before, Arthur introduced us at this show and everything ages and ages ago.
Cameron McVeigh is Neneh Cherry's husband.
Yeah. Yeah. And he, a record producer was, because you
Oh,
introduced me,
great
because he
record.
was a great record producer and
Yeah,
everything.
I mean, he did work with Massive Attack. I mean,
And I think
many
what
other
had
things.
happened was, he had like obviously made so many of the Neneh's records with her, and they wanted to bring somebody else in to sort of take over that sort of production role so that he could work with her, just collaborating on the songwriting more and stuff. And so I was brought in as that, and the three of us became a really great team, I think, and we made two. The first album we made was it was with this band Rocket Number 9, who were just a duo of like synth and drums. And
Right.
she wanted to make a record where it was with a band and it was just like kind of live takes and quite raw.
Right.
And we recorded that. But then the album we recorded afterwards, I made all the music. And it was just me making all the music, her writing the songs and doing the vocals. And we recorded most of the record here in upstate New York at Carl Berger's house, who is the vibraphone player who played with Don Cherry.
Wow.
And his records on Blue Note and
Don
everything.
Cherry, her Neneh's stepfather. I guess,
Yeah.
Father, yeah.
So, and I was obviously, Don Cherry's an enormous influence to me, like hugely important jazz musician. And it was like me and Neneh working together, but also connecting to all this history at the same time. And that's, I'm so proud of that record. It was a really, really important.
Broken Promises,
Broken Politics.
Broken Politics, yeah.
Yeah, and I really love that record. And the process of making it was, really cool as well. But yeah, that's another connection between us. Is
No,
Cameron knew of me because of you.
Yeah, no, he mentioned that recently, and I was like, no, I don't remember. but collaborating in our research, I saw that you did something with Thom Yorke. What was that like?
Yeah, so I met Thom. One of the reasons, so I got involved in doing sort of like live electronic music in around like 2002, 2003. It's like,
so that was that around the time that they did Optimistic?
Yeah, they'd just done Kid A and all that stuff. And then their next album, Hail to the Thief, was coming out, and they were doing a tour, and they invited me to open for them on their tour. And I had to get some sort of live performance together. And that's when I got involved in doing much more sort of abstract, sort of improvised music using electronics, laptops, samplers and things, which is something I did quite a lot of sort of until about like 2009 or something. And so I knew Thom from doing that tour. And after that, it was when I started working with Burial. Thom was such a huge Burial fan and everything, and I was the like connection to Burial. And then that's when we worked on some songs together, the three of us. And he's another one of these people I was lucky enough to connect with at a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, when Optimistic came out, that blew my mind. That was like my favorite song for a year. Literally, I used to play.
Oh, there's so much incredible stuff, and they're a band that's been with me since their very beginning. I was a teenager when I first saw them, and have followed them throughout the whole way. And then to actually end up being connected to them sort of halfway through all of that was really profound. And like, I'm lucky enough to have seen them play so many times. I had amazing experiences watching them and stuff. And then, and to actually have, made some music and stuff with Thom. Yeah, it's great. We haven't done anything in a while, but like, it's always, he's such an inspiring person.
So pretty much the people you've been able to collaborate with are people that you really wanted to collaborate with.
Well, my idea about collaboration is to actually not worry too much about who I want to collaborate ever with, and think more about, it's much more about the people to me. It's just about like getting on with life and seeing who I bump into. And if we have a connection of some sort, that's usually driven by personality first and foremost, like us wanting to like have a conversation. Then I followed those things based purely on gut instincts. It's very, very rare that I've like pursued anything of like, being like, oh, I really need to work with this person. That's been less my sort of style, because when I think about it, the things that I've got most out of it, like I love a lot of the music and everything, but like the personal experiences I've had, being knowing these actual people, are the things that have really stuck with me. Actually, like you mentioned the record with Neneh, like I'm instantly transported back to us hanging out in this house together, making this music and things, and like. It's that experience, the experience of the process and the connection with the person that is the profound thing for me at the end of the day. So I sort of, I'm searching for that. That's what I'm looking. I'm looking for. There's this Kurt Vonnegut, one of the Kurt Vonnegut books. He has that concept of the Karas, like people in the world that you have that you're connected to. And I always think about that. I love that idea of meeting somebody for the first time, but just knowing like, oh my God, we're connected. We just have a natural thing, and that's what I'm looking for.
I have one last question, I think. You started your own label way long ago, right? Text.
Yeah.
Well, a few things. Did you ever have you signed artists, or is it pretty much for your own music?
It's for my own music. Here and there, there's been friends of mine that have wanted to put something out that I could easily sort of help them with it and be like, let's get your record out into the world. But I've never... There's never been any signing or anything sort of. And the reason I did start the label was I just hit a point where I'd worked with a bunch of labels, major labels, indie labels, all these things. And I was like, this is the last experience that I haven't done myself, of just being like, what if I'm just in charge of all that sort of stuff? And I actually found it hugely liberating to be like, absolutely. I can just go at my own pace in my own way and do things my way. And my audience actually responded to it really well. They were like, they don't need to be marketed to about what I'm doing anymore.
No, you've been doing it for quite a long time.
They just want to get what I do in the purest, most simple possible way, So the label's been, since around 2010, 2011 or something, I've just worked pretty much entirely on my own.
One other really important thing you did was you took Domino Records to court.
Mm-hmm.
And on the streaming, on getting your proper royalties on streaming, right? And with the court ruling, it created a precedent for artists in the future, which is really important. How did that happen? I mean, other than wanting to get money.
I mean, it wasn't like a court ruling where a judge was like, this has to happen. Like, it just hit a point where they had to back down on it and agree with the thing. So the basic concept of the debate was that I felt that me and a lot of other artists were in a similar situation, had signed contracts in the 90s or whatever, or a long time ago, before streaming it had existed at all. What had happened was the music industry had changed radically, but we had these contracts where we were getting paid based on for a completely new system that didn't exist at the time, that was very different. So I felt like I was getting paid based on CD sales, basically. So the royalty was based on a model that involved manufacturing CDs and distributing them and doing a completely different way of working.
Having the label have to spend money, actually, and now they have to spend no money.
Exactly. And, contracts had things like packaging deductions in
Yeah.
and stuff. Like, if you spent a lot on having a lavish package, your royalties will be reduced and everything. And none of these things apply to streaming, And I feel like there was a moment where the record companies just quietly wanted to say to everybody, like, oh, streaming's just the new thing. It's the same as selling CDs. We're just going to keep keep using the same royalties for that. And that's the thing that I disputed. I said that streaming my music isn't the same as selling a CD, and it should be treated more similarly, more like licensing the music for film or TV
for a movie,
or for a movie or everything. And it should be a different deal because of that,
Well, I mean, that's super important. That may be one of the most important things you've been involved with for other artists, because literally,
yeah, I mean, it was a major thing. It kind of took over my life for a little while. Like, it was pretty heavy, like court session. Like, it was me and a friend of mine who's a lawyer and a team of us still working on it. And I think, I learned so much. I learned that when it comes to these things with the law, it's totally, it is about the law. It's about like what exists in the contracts and the paperwork. That's all you can really go with. And I never really anticipated that there was a turning point when I wasn't even trying to make it public, but my music got taken off streaming services for a while in the dispute, and it pushed the whole thing into the public realm because people had to understand why that had happened. And when that did happen, it became a massive story, and people were very supportive of what I was doing, and it was quite a powerful sort of moment, and like an interesting thing. And I'm quite proud of it when I think about it now.
Well, you should be, because literally that it is a precedent, and people can go to that and say, hey, this is what it should be. It's only fair, and record labels aren't really known for being fair,
Yeah, I mean, I've had countless musicians come to me afterwards and say like, what you did was incredible, and it allowed us to go and renegotiate with our record company or speak to them about what was going on, about like, and it's, we're just at a point where I've lived through these different eras where the way people consume music is so radically different now to where it was, the way where the money's coming in. It's just, it's insanity to not modify contracts to adapt them to the current times.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, thank you for this. I know you don't do many interviews, and this is really cool.
Oh, no problem at all, Arthur.
And it's great to reconnect for sure. And send me the electronic stuff.
I'm going to have a look for it. Yeah, I've got like a CDR or something. Maybe I can do a rip of it. I'm going to find that for you.
Yeah. This is Arthur Baker. Still looking for the perfect beat, and the book's going to be out in May on Faber. And catch me when you see me out there DJing or talking about the book. And thank you, Kieran Hebden.
Thanks.